Calling all units, calling all units. Donut Shop has a fresh dozen. Go ahead and take a 1040.
Here we go. New gun law. Are you up on this? You up on this craziness?
Yeah.
In the Wild Wild West of Florida? No.
July 1st.
July 1st just went through. So before you needed a permit to carry a concealed firearm, and now it's permitless carry. You don't need a permit to carry a concealed firearm. You can now carry it in any place that was permitted with the concealed weapons permit.
Right.
The problem is the education thing that I have is like, if you take the permit class, you know these locations. If now anybody can carry it, and now they don't know. Oh, I'm not allowed to carry here. So, anyways, how do you think that's going to affect you do you see it as a problem moving forward?
Right. Well, so let's first, in order to really look at that and evaluate it, you got to know what's in place before. You got to know what was in place before that.
Right.
And really, the only thing that changed is there was kind of an acknowledgement that was what was necessary to obtain the license was so minimal, and so depending on who you go to, because it was so minimal that, for example, you can be a firearms instructor and run a program for that, and you can make them shoot a course, you can make them go through this many hours, and you can say, for my certification, you're going to need this.
Yeah.
But there were other guys that followed the minimum, which is shoot one round from a 22 in a bucket. Bah, okay, you're certified. Good.
Yeah.
And it became a stamp, right? It was like a cookie cutter thing where they were just making more money. And so I think first it's the law didn't change in the sense of who can have a gun.
Yeah.
All that it was they acknowledge, okay, look, the people are not really getting trained. You know what I mean? Depending on who you go to. Obviously, there are trainers that were good, but a lot of the trainers were just cookie cutter, assembly line, make money for the certification and go, right? And so part number one is they weren't really getting much training anyway. So the rationale behind the law was let's get rid of the training requirement. Other than that, you still have to be, you cannot be a convicted felon. You got to be over 21. All those rules change. You cannot carry it into a sporting event. You cannot carry it into private property.
You still
all
have to
those
get a
things.
background check to buy a firearm.
Right. To purchase a gun and be in possession, any sort of possession of it, all the laws remain the same. Right. Now, as far as law enforcement, obviously, statistically speaking, we're going to confront more people with firearms.
Yeah.
But it's not going to change the way we respond to people because we train that everyone is armed anyway.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Said it 100 times leading up to that.
Yeah. So I feel that, the concept was the training is low anyway, and we want more people to be able to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And that's where that lies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I think you're on. I got when the new law was coming, and one of my neighbors saw me. He said, "Hey, I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How is this going to affect law enforcement now? It's going to be crazy."
Yeah.
And I kind of gave him the same answer that you did. Is like, well, the law is kind of like the same. And when we encounter people, we always think they have a firearm on them, anyways. And we do that because you don't want to be taken by surprise if they do.
Right.
So I'm already assuming until I can clear your waistband, your ankles, your butt crack. No, I'm just kidding. But until I can clear any part of your body that you can conceal a firearm, I assume that you have a firearm.
Right.
Because
exactly.
If you do and I didn't, well, then that's not good for me or my family.
Mm-hmm. A scenario that I used to always give in training is one of the most common calls, but could be the absolute worst call you could ever go to is a 911 hang-up. Right?
Yeah.
So that means that someone called the police and at some point they turned it off. So it could be, most of the time, kids playing with phones.
Yeah.
But it could be Jeffrey Dahmer in there.
Yeah.
And somebody got to the phone and he cut it out, right? And so I used to give an analogy all the time, and that was that cops always have to be prepared and measure up and expect people to try to kill you. Right?
Yeah.
So I would always say, you get to the 911 call, you knock on the door, you step back, you don't put yourself directly in the floor, but you're between the door frame and the window. Because rounds may go through, and then the door opens, and we're in Miami, so a Cuban grandmother with a bate casa, right? And she looks at you and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's my 7-year-old is playing with the phone." And you go and you look at her and you size her up and you say, "Okay, don't worry, do me a favor, go in there and get him."
Yeah.
But you're looking at every corner of the house, waiting for the shots to come off. And then all of a sudden, a little 7-year-old comes out with no shirt and Spider-Man underwear.
Yeah.
And he comes up, "Oh, I love the police," and he comes to give you a hug. And after you size him up, you go and you give him a hug and you take a selfie with him. But you always have to expect that a gun is going to come out of somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't think it's going to change police response. I don't think it's going to change police interactions. We always feel that way. All it's going to do is, statistically, I think it's going to have us confront more people that say, "Hey, just so you know, I'm armed."
And to your point, if somebody's listening that doesn't understand that, and there's they've never been in law enforcement, like, man, that sounds like you want all these officers to be super nervous around somebody. Man, you're gonna get somebody shot. On the contrary, if you're prepared, you're more likely to be prepared for what's happening and mitigate something
exactly
and prevent that from happening. Whereas if you got caught off guard, you might be more apt to pull and use
overreact.
Yeah, overreact.
Right.
Exactly. So.
Yeah. I think it's really important, and a lot of people don't know. And I've had this conversation before, and this goes back to communication, right? And what we have to explain to the public, because people just don't know, and that is, well, why was the cop so strict? Why was he so stern? Well, if you remember, in the 70s, they did a study, and they grabbed a bunch of cop killers that were on death row for murdering cops. I don't know if you remember this. I think it was either Caliber Press or somebody who did this.
This is the first time I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
So tell me, in the 70s, what happened?
So what ended up happening was they did this study, and they interviewed all these cop killers, and the why'd you do it? Why did you kill the cop? And the ongoing the common denominator that they continued to say was, well, the officer didn't look assertive. His uniform was disheveled. He didn't take control. He looked kind of passive. It looked easy. Yeah. And so I did it. And so after that, if you remember, I learned in the academy, hey, always look assertive, always look in control, never look flustered.
Yeah.
And there was a term used at the time, fake it if you must, but look professional and look good.
Make it look good.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when a lot of the public says, why was he so stern? He didn't smile. Well, he's faking it.
Yeah.
He's got to fake it because he doesn't know when you know what I mean? And so those are little things that I think a lot of members of the community don't realize. But for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah.
And most cops have to present themselves that way because they need to look more in control than they actually are, because how control are we really? How much in control are we really?
Yeah.
You
got to hope that the person is a law-abiding citizen,
Of
is in
course.
fear of going to jail, or just doesn't want confrontation. But if you get somebody that does not check any of those boxes,
right.
You got to handle business.
Boogie.
A well-trained cop is probably going to be the most composed and the most professional and have the bandwidth to make the best decisions.
Yeah.
That's why training is so important.
Calling all units. Donut Shot has a fresh dozen. Go ahead and take a 1040.